यो विश्वं विदधाति पाति सततं संहारयत्यञ्जसा सृष्ट्वा दिव्यमहौषधीश्च विविधान् दूरीकरोत्यामयान् विभ्राणो जलना चकास्ति भुवने पीयूषपूर्णं घटं तं धन्वन्तरिरूपमीशममलं वन्दामहे श्रेयसे वन्दामहे श्रेयसे वन्दामहे श्रेयसे ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्ति. Welcome back, everyone. Today we will be starting the review sessions on the Ayurvedic fundamental principles. And most of these topics that we're going to cover, you've already gone through in your previous Ayurvedic training. But we wanted to make sure that you have a sound fundamentals, because now that's going to be the basis for understanding pathology and the variation of what is deviated from the normal functions of these aspects of health. So today we'll be talking about the doshas, the dhatus, the malas, and also shrotamsi. We're going to go over this in brief, and whatever isn't covered in the videos will be elaborated upon in the live sessions. And in that we'll be talking about how these are related to an actual pathology and what part it plays in production of an actual disease condition. In Ayurveda, our approach to understanding an individual state of health goes back to the balance of the doshas, the dhatus, the malas, and also the shrotamsi. And that, if we look at every aspect, relates back to the 5 elements, because those are responsible for the manifestation of all of these humors as well as structures. So the 5 elements, the Pancha Mahabhutas, are the Akasha or space, Vayu or air, Agni or fire, Up or water, and finally Prithvi or earth. And they manifest in this particular order because it goes from the most subtle to the more grosser elements. These elements are representative in the human body by different functions as well as structures. We know the existence of these 5 elements by understanding the functions of the doshas. So the doshas are made up in combination of these particular elements. The Vata dosha is comprised of the space and air element. The Pitta dosha is made up of the fire and water element. And the Kapha dosha is made up of the water and earth element. Each one of these doshas have specific gunas or qualities associated with them. And that, again, is a representation of the qualities that are associated with these 5 elements. The qualities associated with Vata dosha are Ruksha or dry, Laghu or light, Shita or cold, Kara or rough, Sukshma or small or minute, and Chala, which is movement. The qualities of Pitta dosha are Sasneha, which means it's slightly unctuous. It's slightly different than that which we see in Kapha, whereas that is Snigdha or completely unctuous. The other qualities of Pitta dosha are Tikshna or penetrating, Ushna or hot, Laghu or light, Visram, which is a strong odor, Sara, which is freely moving or flowing, and Drava, which is fluidity. And the qualities of Kapha are Snigdha or unctuous, Shita or cold, Guru, which is heavy, Manda, which is slow, Shlakshna, which is slippery, Mritsna, which is slimy, and Sthira, which is stable. It's important for us to know these qualities that are associated with the doshas because this gives us an idea as to how there is variation, how these doshas change. So for instance, when we talk about different types of food and activities, these different types of food and activities also have certain qualities. And depending on what those qualities are, we know how they interact with the dosha. So for instance, if you are taking in or consuming something that's very cold and very dry, that is similar to the qualities that are there in Vata dosha, which also has the cold and dry qualities. So therefore, it causes an increase of the Vata dosha. Similarly, if you were to take the opposite of those qualities, something that is unctuous and something that is smooth, so foods that have the opposite qualities would help to pacify the Vata dosha because it is opposite to the qualities that are associated with that. So knowing and being very familiar with the qualities associated with the doshas is very important when we get to the aspect of treatment or the aspect of intervention. Each dosha has specific functions that it carries out in the bodies. And again, this is the representation of the 5 elements and how the role they play in human anatomy and physiology. So the specific functions or the karmas of the Vata dosha are: it initiates enthusiasm, respiration, all activities in the body. It's responsible for the proper functioning of the mind and speech, initiation of natural urges, maintenance of the dhatus, and normal functions of the sensory organs. Basically, we need to always remember that Vata is responsible for all forms of movement, whether it be a minute or a gross movement, but Vata is the one that does that. If we compare Vata to the other doshas, they are more stagnant, whereas Vata is the only one that has the ability to move or to push. So therefore, Vata is a very important dosha, especially again when we look at the aspect of pathology, because it's the dosha that's responsible for moving, pushing, or initiating the other doshas to do their functions as well. So the specific karmas or functions of the Pitta dosha are: it attends to digestion, it maintains the body temperature, it's responsible for vision, induction of hunger, thirst and appetite, complexion, intelligence, courage, and softness in the body. And here we can see that it is a complete representation again of the elements that make up Pitta dosha, which are the fire and the water element. So the fire element, which aids Pitta in carrying out the function of digestion. And we'll get to that again when we talk about the specific functions of Agni and its role in digestion and its role in maintenance of health. The next is the functions or karmas of Kapha dosha. So Kapha, it produces stability, lubrication, compactness, and firmness of the joints, the ability to withstand difficult situations and emotions, and also it provides strength. So those are the functions of Kapha dosha, again in representation of the elements that it is composed of, the water and the earth element. Those are the grossest of the elements that are there, of the 5. And so its main function and its main purpose is to provide the actual structures and the physical stability of the body. So when we start going into pathologies and the variations where the doshas are out of balance, what we're going to notice is that there is much more variation when it comes to the Vata dosha compared to the Pitta dosha and compared to the Kapha dosha. Because, again, Vata requires a lot of movement. Vata is the one that has the ability to move all over the body and has the ability to affect all of the other structures. In comparison to that and the minuteness of Vata, Pitta is a little bit less. So Pitta also moves. Pitta also has the ability to carry out certain functions, but it is more stagnant and requires the push of Vata to produce its functions. And even more or less than Pitta in movement, if we look at Kapha. Kapha is the most stagnant, the most stable of the doshas. And because of this quality of possessing stability, it has the least ability to produce disease because it requires that much more of a push, it requires that much more of a variation in order to produce a disease or produce a pathology. So that's why when we look at actual signs and symptoms in pathology, we'll notice that there are 80 signs and symptoms or conditions that are associated with Vata, whereas there are only 40 signs and symptoms or conditions associated with Pitta, and there are even less, there's only 20 signs and symptoms or conditions associated with Kapha. Because it's the most stable, it requires that much more of variation to produce a pathology. So next we look at the dhatus. So there are 7 dhatus which you all know. They are Rasa, Rakta, Mamsa, Meda, Asti, Majja, and Shukra. There's a very close relationship between the doshas and the dhatus, and also the doshas and the malas. Remember, the doshas are like energies. They are capable of carrying out certain functions, whereas the dhatus and the malas represent the actual structures that are there, the different layers in the body, as well as the malas are the output. So the doshas carry out the function, the dhatus provide the structure or the actual equipment necessary to carry out the function, and the malas are the output or the end result of what happens during that process. So they all have a very close relationship. They are not mutually exclusive. So in saying that, the relationship between which dosha and which dhatu, Vata is the dosha associated with the Asti dhatu. It's situated in the Asti dhatu because the Asti dhatu contains more of a porous nature. It's more porous, it has more space, so it has the ability for Vata to move inside of it. The Pitta dosha is located or seated in the Rakta dhatu or blood, and also in Swedas or sweat. So whenever there is a variation in the Pitta dosha, it also has the ability to manifest in a variation or a change in the Rakta dhatu as well as in sweat. And Kapha dosha, again being the more stable one, has a closer relationship with more of the physical structures. Therefore, it is the energy that is seated in the Rasa dhatu, in the Mamsa dhatu, the Medas, Majja, and Shukra, as well as in Mutra and Purisha or feces. So again, this is important for us to know. This is known as the Ashraya Ashrayi Bhava. Ashraya is the vessel or that which contains. Ashrayi is that which sits in that container or which has the ability to use that container. So the doshas are that which is seated in the actual containers, which are the dhatus and the malas. Again, this is important for us to know because, as we've all come across, when we know that health is a balance of all of these factors, and when there is a variation from that balance, either an increase or a decrease, it starts to produce a ripple effect. So we start to see a variation or a change in the normal situation of these either doshas or dhatus or the malas. So for instance, if you have, going back to the qualities, if you have qualities such as cold or rough, and those are similar qualities of Vata, then it starts to aggravate the Vata dosha. In saying that, if there is an increase of the Vata dosha, it also starts to affect the Asti dhatu, depending on how much of those qualities the body is exposed to, that much it has the ability to affect the ashraya or the containers where Vata is situated. So therefore it again produces a ripple effect. The more and more of those qualities the person is exposed to, the more and more the dosha gets aggravated and therefore starts to affect its associated structures. Okay, and it's the same thing for Pitta and it's the same thing for Kapha as well. So again, looking at that, this is why we need to have a very clear understanding of the foundations, because Whether it's a disease condition that has a particular name in Ayurveda or it doesn't, we always go back to these basics. We're always going to go back to looking at the state of the dosha. It's whether it's balanced or imbalanced. If it's imbalanced, whether it's an increase or decrease, and what were the specific qualities that induce this change. So we're going to again go all the way back to the beginning. Okay? So next we need to look at, in saying that we're looking at the normal functioning, we need to understand what are the normal functions of the dhatus as well. So the rasa dhatu, its main function is prinana or nourishment. It is responsible for transference or carrying all of the different structures and nourishment, what we gain from digestion, as well as transference of hormones, of enzymes to different parts of the body. It's constantly circulating. So that's why it has the ability and the function to nourish the whole body. When in the process of production of the rasa dhatu, the other associated structure that it produces is the stanya or breast milk. So a question that arises is that if this is this only applicable to women, because breast milk is only produced in women. But even though this is the upadhatu or the other associated production in the process of nourishment of rasa dhatu, the stanya, it's there in women, as well as the essence of that is also in men. Even though the the breast milk doesn't come out in men, that's because there is a lack of a particular enzyme that doesn't produce that. However, it doesn't mean that byproduct isn't there. That byproduct is used in a different form of nourishment in the body. Okay? And also in that process, the mala, remember we talked about it being a structure and a function, and then a byproduct or a waste product of that particular process. So the waste product in the production of the rasa dhatu, or the mala of that, is kapha. Kapha here is not kapha dosha. Kapha here actually means lubrication. So in the rasa dhatu, or the plasma, has the ability to again produce more amount of lubrication for all of the other structures that are there in the body. Okay? The next dhatu is the rakta dhatu, and its main function is jivana, or maintenance of life. And so that seems very general. Why would the rakta dhatu be responsible for maintaining a person's life? But it's also in close relation with the rasa dhatu. It helps to, again, transference of nutrients. It also helps in being able to carry out all of the other functions as well. It's constantly circulating. So that's why it has the ability to, or its main function is jivana, or maintenance of life. The associated structures that comes out of the process of nourishment of the rakta dhatu is kandara, or tendons and vessels, and also in women, the menstrual blood. So the tendons are, even though they seem similar to the mamsa dhatu, it is a more finer and more minute and soft sort of muscular tissue. So that's what is produced in the byproduct of transference or nourishment of the rakta dhatu. And the waste product produced there is pitta, which actually here means the enzymes. So rakta dhatu is again responsible for production of enzymes. The next dhatu is the mamsa dhatu, or the muscular tissues, and its function is lepa, or covering. So the mamsa dhatu helps in covering all of the other physical structures. So here, as you can see, we're going a bit deeper and deeper into the layers and the structures in the body. So we have the rasa, which is constantly circulating. It's very light, whereas rakta is more solid, also constantly circulating. And then mamsa, something which is even more gross structurally, and it helps in covering. Again, we're going more deeper and deeper inwards. Okay, so the mamsa dhatu, it's the byproduct in the transference or the nourishment of the mamsa dhatu is the vasa, or fatty tissue. Here, fatty tissue means the fat that is located between the muscular tissue. and also the 6 layers of skin. So in Ayurveda, we describe that there are just 3 layers. There are 6 layers, which is described by Sushruta Samhita. And in that, this process of nourishment is where the 6 layers of skin is produced and constantly nourished. And the waste product produced in this process is the kamala, or the waste that is located in cavities. So we have certain amount of moisture that accumulates in open cavities in the body, and that is known as the kamala. Ka is another word for actually the space element. Okay. The next dhatu is the medus, or the fatty tissue, and its main function again here is sneha, or lubrication, and the byproduct of that, the constant nourishment of that, is svedus, which is sweat, snayu, which are similar to kandra, are smaller ligaments. So you have when you go through anatomy and physiology, there are certain types of ligaments that we have. We have very thick ligaments that are much more stronger and more stable, and then we have very minute, smaller ligaments, or ligamental tissue. So the smaller, finer ligaments are known as snayu, and that is a byproduct of the production of the medo dhatu. And the waste product produced in this process is again sweat. So sweat here is the sweat that is produced internally, and the mala is the sweat that is actually excreted out of the body. Okay? The next dhatu is the asti dhatu, or the bony tissue, and its main function is for dharana, or providing support to the body. Without the asti dhatu, we would not be able to stand erect. It is one of the grossest, again, the more gross of the tissue elements that provides the actual structure of the body. And in the process of producing this, or constant nourishment of the asti dhatu, we get also the nourishment and the production of teeth, or danta. And the byproduct, or the waste product of that, is kesha and loma, or the hairs on the body. Not kesha, the hair on your head, but kesha, the hair on your body. So in understanding that, the presence and the growth of hair on the body gives us an idea of the process of dhatu parinama, or the nourishment of the dhatus. If a person has a proper growth and production of the hairs in the body, that indicates that this process that's going on internally is being done in a proper way. If there's a variation, so for instance, if the hairs on the body is irregular in growth, it's spotchy, then that also indicates that there's a variation in the process of nourishment of these dhatus. So here again, we're going back to looking at what are the normal functions of the dhatus and what is the normal representation of that. And whenever there is a variation in this normal, then that means that there is something wrong in the process. And that's when we start to again go back and figure out what went wrong in this process. Okay? So the next dhatu is the majja dhatu. So here again, as you've seen, we've gone in from the external, the more lighter and the more externally circulating tissue elements, and we're going more and more deeper into the core of the physical structures of the body. So we've gone from rasa, which is circulating, rakta, which is circulating, mamsa, which covers the external structure, then medus, which is located in between these, then asti, which is the bone, which is even more to the core of the body, and then the majja, which is located within the bones. So the majja is known as bone marrow, as well as the structures that are located within a bony structure. So for instance, the organs such as the brain and the spinal cord and the central nervous system, all of that is included under the majja dhatu because they are located, or they are engulfed by a bony structure. Okay? So the function of that is purana, which means filling of the bony structures. And the byproduct that is produced in this nourishment process is kesha. So here it's the hair on the head. So the majja is responsible for the hair on the head. And the waste product produced is lubrication of the eyes, the rectum, and the skin. And the final dhatu is the Shukra Dhatu. So again, here we've gone all the way down to the core of the physical human body, and the Shukra Dhatu is the reproductive tissue. So it is actually the essence of all of these dhatus. Each of these dhatus is named in this particular order because the process of nourishment is in this order. So we're going from external to internal. And the more we go internally, the more stable the structures are and the more of strength it provides to the body. So the Shukra Dhatu is the reproductive tissue. Its function is Garbha Utpada, which means to produce a garbha or produce a fetus. It's the byproduct of this nourishment process is Shramshru, which is the mustache, and also Ojas, which is the essence of all of the dhatus. So, for instance, having a mustache, even being male or female, also indicates a proper dhatu nourishment or a proper dhatu process. So, it may not be very nice for us to have it, but it also indicates the fact that your dhatus are being nourished properly. And the waste product of this process, again, is Ojas. You can't really consider Ojas as a mala, but it's actually the essence or the end product of this whole process. Okay? So here, now we know what the normal functions of the dhatus are. What are the byproducts of this normal functioning? So again, if we start to notice that there's a variation or something different or signs and symptoms in any one of these stages or any one of these byproducts, it again indicates that there's a variation in the process. In Ayurvedic days, when this science was created and written, we did not have instruments. We did not have all of these other imaging techniques to figure out what was happening inside a human body. But what we did use was inference. So our tool for understanding the variation in the physiological processes or a change into pathology was by looking and very minutely observing what the body was trying to tell us. So we assume that everyone starts off in a state of health, but when there's a variation from that state of health, these certain signs and symptoms indicate that there is a change from that normal healthy process. So this is what we used to understand what was happening in that process. So in conclusion, we've now looked at all of the normal structures and humors and the energies required for carrying out our day-to-day processes. Whenever we talk about the description of a healthy person, we look at the balance. So we look at Samadosha, or the balance of these three doshas, Samadhatu, which is the balance of the dhatus or the tissue elements, and Samamala. We talk about, again, the balance of the production and the excretion of the waste products. The next video that we'll talk about Sama Agni, or the balance of the Agnis. And again, when there is variation or a change from that balance, that is when we start to get into the realm of pathology or disease or signs and symptoms which are apart from a state of